Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. I really hate to do this to everybody, but, you know, just like the radio program, I choose to talk about things that either interest me or that I think that you need to know more about because it's going to be in the news and you're going to hear a lot of misinformation, propaganda, or just flat out lies about things that are going on. For example, in yesterday's radio program, I talked about CBS's 60 Minutes, which, by the way, I didn't see it last night because we had the family over and we were doing some other things, but that's beside the point. I didn't see 60 Minutes, but I played on the radio program yesterday Scott Pelley's introduction in which he described that the so-called, and I'm going to keep saying so-called whistleblower because I'm not convinced that this guy or this woman, whoever it is truly a whistleblower, that the whistleblower was under federal protective service because of death threats against him or her. Simply not the case. I've read the letter from the law firm, the whistleblower's law firm, that expresses concerns about the safety of the whistleblower, but I don't buy it. You know, as an individual who received, a few death threats during my tenure as the undersecretary, almost all of which were just, even though the FBI checked them all out, there was only one that was actually a credible death threat. And so every time that I hear people talk about, I fear for my safety or I've got a death threat or whatever it might be, I tend to blow it off. I may have told you that one time, this has been maybe 3 or 4 years ago at the radio station, that they came to me because there was somebody walking around the building trying to find, asking weird questions like, is this where Michael Brown works? Is Michael Brown inside? When's he going to get off? What door does he use? Asking all the kinds of questions that, frankly, only a stupid person would ask. Because someone who was intent on doing harm would have been able to see that, well, there are no cars out front in the circle drive of our building, and all the other cars are out back. So unless I'm going to take an Uber or take a taxi or something else, this guy had plenty of places to perch and watch to see where I came out of the building. But nonetheless, they came and got my car keys, parked my car in the garage, called the Denver Police Department, and by the time the DPD got there, it's kind of like when Congresswoman Diana DeGette says, hey, if you're worried about somebody breaking into your home, burglars or whatever, all you have to do is call the Denver Police Department because they will just be there an hour. They'll be there in 15 minutes or so, and then you might be dead anyway. Well, that was kind of the case with me because I didn't see it as a threat. I understand the company had to take the procedures that they did, but once they put my car in the garage, what was I going to do? I'm going to get in my car, and I'm going to drive out of the garage and just keep driving. And if somebody wants to start shooting at me, well, I'm going to start shooting back or drive off as fast as I can. So every time I hear somebody claim, they've gotten death threats or whatever, I tend to blow it off. And when a guy claims that he's under federal protective service, in other words, either the Federal Protective Service, the Secret Service, in this case, I think he works for the intelligence agency. So let's say he works for the CIA. The CIA security services are going to put this guy under their watch, and they're going to put him in an undisclosed location. They're going to put him up at his house, and they're going to have a 24/7 watch on him. None of that's true. None of that's true, but that shows you how over the top this has gotten with impeachment. So in yesterday's podcast, I talked about we were going to have a 2-week impeachment recess. I also said that I didn't think that would keep the Democrats or the news media, or for that matter, the Republicans, from talking about it, and certainly it has not stopped them from talking about it. The House Intelligence Committee is going to start calling people and taking testimony. But otherwise, we might as well have considered yesterday, Monday, September 30th, as the first day for a lot of Democratic members to go back to their home districts and to kind of feel out and understand where their constituents are with respect to this whole impeachment hullabaloo. But right now, I think the real question that Democrats face, whether it's a swing district a solidly Democrat district, a wacko district like San Francisco. I don't know. Right now, I think the real question they face is how quickly can they move on an impeachment vote. Now, here are the procedures that I want you to take into consideration that maybe other people have explained it, but because I don't listen to a lot of talk radio, in fact, I've listened to very little talk radio, I don't know whether this has been explained or not. When the Speaker of the House came out and announced that she was opening an impeachment inquiry, that actually required a vote of the members of the House, whether or not to open an inquiry. So what she really did, what Speaker Pelosi did, and again, you've heard me say that I think Nancy Pelosi is smart. And I think in this case, she was incredibly smart because she knew it was not safe at that stage of the game. What's it been now? Has it been a week? Yeah, it's been a week because I was in Washington, D.C. when all of this broke. So I think she was smart by not calling for a vote because that would have caused several things to have happened. First and foremost, it would have required those who are on the fence, Democrats that aren't quite sure what they're going to do, it would have caused them either to vote against the impeachment inquiry, to vote present, which is in essence not voting at all, or to vote no, and to go against the Speaker, which then has its own political ramifications. And of course, all the Republicans would have voted against it. So there's actually not even a guarantee that the opening of an impeachment inquiry would have passed the necessary votes in the Congress to get the House Judiciary Committee to start the process. So what Pelosi did was she ignored the rules, which, she can do, and she said that I'm going to open an impeachment inquiry, which is in essence just giving the signal to Jerry Nadler, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, to start holding hearings. And it's also it's also, even though technically the House impeachment proceedings should take place in front of the House Judiciary Committee, because this whistleblower is a member of the intelligence community, the IC, it also takes place in front of the House Intelligence Committee. So she was signaling to Adam Schiff, little lion Adam Schiff. Last Friday, I walked out at the end of my program, and Big Al Williams and JoJo, who do the Broncos show from 3 to 7 over on that other little station, all cornered me and wanted to know, oh my gosh, what do you think about what Adam Schiff said? We just watched it on television. And I had to plead ignorance. I hadn't seen it. So I went back and watched it. And I think calling Adam Schiff little lying Adam Schiff is absolutely appropriate. So here's where the Democrats are now. They really need to make this happen before Thanksgiving to have any real hope of avoiding slipping into the Democratic presidential primary process, which is going to start after the first of the year. And they need to do it now with a current leader and several candidates who are members of the Senate. Because it's going to be surprising if Mitch McConnell passes on the opportunity to use impeachment to have an impact on that process. That is precisely what Mitch McConnell is going to do. If Mitch McConnell has any opportunity to use articles of impeachment that get passed over to the United States Senate for trial, Mitch McConnell is going to make hay with that. And I want you to stop and think about this. There is virtually, in fact, I would be willing to bet the ranch on it based on everything right now, at this moment. Notice my lawyer weasel language here. At this very moment, Your Honor, I would be willing to bet the ranch that the Senate never passes by even a close margin, a conviction in the impeachment process. And here's why. One, they don't have 2/3. You have people like Joe Manchin, who is not necessarily a big fan of Donald Trump, but is trying to maintain a seat in West Virginia where coal is an issue, the shutting down of coal is an issue, where climate change seems to be a farce. He is straddling the fence such that if he doesn't have a jock strap made of steel, I don't know how he's straddling that fence. And here's the other thing that you need to think about. I don't think there's any illusion about this. I think every single Democrat, whether they want to admit it or not, have already made up their mind. I think even those in swing district, if they are infected, if they have Trump derangement syndrome that has metastasized, they don't really care about what their constituents say. They're going to vote for impeachment because for them, the removal of Donald Trump as president prior to the 2020 election is the only way that they ensure that Donald Trump is not elected to a second term. Let me repeat that. That is the only way for them to ensure that Donald Trump is not elected to a second term. The reason I repeat that is, quite simply, that's the objective. The objective is not, did this president really commit high crimes and misdemeanors? We know he hasn't committed treason. We know he hasn't done anything, in terms of bribery. If you actually read the Constitution, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. In my opinion, he truly has not done that. At least I've not seen any evidence of that. But if you have Trump derangement syndrome that has metastasized throughout your body, you don't care. You know, when you look at the current crop of presidential candidates, including Hillary Rodham Clinton, who is now, I think, I'm not sure she's going to run. I've got a couple of friends who are absolutely convinced that she's going to step in at the last minute, either at the Democrat convention or somewhere, and she's going to try to mount a comeback. I'm not convinced of that, but I understand the logic and the reasoning why. But back to these Democrats. They've made up their mind. They know, as they look at that crop of current nominees, that Joe Biden's not going to beat Donald Trump. I don't care how much he brags about he's going to whip him like, some little boy or something. Kamala Harris isn't going to do it. Elizabeth Warren is an ideologue that is to the left of Barack Obama. And I think we've had enough of that. Bernie Sanders, that's a joke. Kamala Harris is a joke. Pete Buttigieg is a joke. Beto O'Rourke. I mean, truthfully, and maybe I'll come to regret these words, but I'd be willing to watch Donald Trump take on any of these presidential candidates right now. Any of them. Because I think he can beat every single one of them. Which is back to my point about Democrats have made up their mind because they know that to guarantee, and of course they're making a big-ass assumption too, that Mike Pence would be the natural nominee to replace Donald Trump in 2020. I'm not absolutely convinced of that. Or that anybody else that decides to run, it's not going to be Bill Weld, former governor of Massachusetts. It's not going to be him. It's not going to be a libertarian candidate. It's not going to be anybody. It's going to be Donald Trump. So the only way to guarantee that he doesn't win is to make sure that he has no chance to run, and thus impeachment. Now, I think a lot of Democrats already know that they're out on a limb. That's why Nancy Pelosi, who was resisting calls for impeachment do you remember? I think I probably spent the last 2 years playing Maxine Waters sound bites of Maxine Waters leading chants about impeach 45, impeach 45. That is all they have talked about for 2.5, almost 3 years. And for those 2.5, almost 3 years, Nancy Pelosi has resisted calls for impeachment. She wouldn't even hold a formal vote to authorize the Judiciary Committee to investigate if impeachment is even warranted. And here's another point about Speaker Pelosi. Now, remember, I keep saying I disagree with everything about Nancy Pelosi when it comes to policy, to subject matters, to any public policy. We're just miles apart. We have irreconcilable differences. A judge would grant us a divorce in a New York minute. But here's what I do agree about Nancy Pelosi. She is an incredibly smart legislator. A smart legislator. She knows that even if she has the 218 votes necessary to authorize an impeachment inquiry, she knows that would be an entirely partisan vote, and it would instantly undermine the credibility of the impeachment probe by exposing it for what it is, a political hit job. But, and here's where I find it, I know this is kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I know this is a lot of inside baseball, but I think this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be able to explain to you from kind of this inside point of view of what I really think is taking place. So let's go back to my point about the 218 votes. When Richard Nixon was about to be impeached, and I emphasize about to, because the House had not passed articles of impeachment. But why did Republicans go to the White House and say to Richard Nixon, you need to resign, and you need to resign because we have a bipartisan vote that is ready to pass articles of impeachment out of the House of Representatives? That's powerful. When you have members of both parties willing to exceed the 218 baseline votes necessary to authorize the inquiry, if you start getting above the 218 and you start losing part of the Republican caucus in the House, that's bad news for Donald Trump. But Nancy Pelosi knows that she doesn't have that right now. The problem is the Democratic Party's base is insisting that Trump be impeached. And it's the base, not Pelosi, who is in charge now. Nancy Pelosi has tried her darndest to try to corral all of these Democrat nominees from, and don't get me wrong, Nancy Pelosi is a far hardcore leftist. I'm not convinced she's a Marxist, not like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Kamala Harris, but she is a far lefty individual in terms of her politics. Then you have that stupid group that everybody refers to as the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez et al. I think Nancy Pelosi has truly lost control of the caucus. And when they had their meeting last week, and she came out, prior to having even seen or read the transcript of the call between Trump and Zelensky, and said that she's authorizing an impeachment inquiry, I think she did so to save her own ass. I sincerely believe that. Just last week, Kamala Harris joined other Democrats in calling for a formal impeachment inquiry into Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. In other words, they're wanting to undo 2016 and everything that's happened ever since, just like it never happened. They want a total do-over, only this time they want to be in charge. And I think that given this reality, the least Democrats could do is spare us the empty spectacle and just hold a vote. But the reason they're not going to, and the reason that Nancy Pelosi is pushing for this fast-track impeachment isn't because facts are determining the timeline, but because they don't want their impeachment charade to drag into the 2020 primary season. Pelosi admitted as much of that on Friday when she told this audience in Atlantic City that the impeachment inquiry has nothing to do with the election. Well, it's a bald-faced lie. The impeachment inquiry has everything to do with the election. I want you to, let's fast forward. I forget when the first primary is. The first caucus is in March in Iowa or something, but whatever it is. It's coming up very quickly. Nancy Pelosi does not want, as they start those debates and they start trying to get those Iowa farmers to vote for whichever candidate they're going to vote for, she doesn't want them to have to face, well, take Elizabeth Warren. Are you going to vote for impeachment? Because the minute Elizabeth Warren says that she, as a senator, would vote to impeach Donald Trump, here's what she's done. She has admitted that the facts don't matter. She's admitting that it doesn't make any difference to her what the articles of impeachment say. She's going to vote to impeach and remove Donald Trump. And once again, I'd bet the ranch on that. I'd bet the undisclosed location on that. Now let's go back to Nancy Pelosi. When she was in Atlantic City and said that the impeachment inquiry has nothing to do with the election, she really did say that. I just don't think she believes it. Nor do I think that any, and I know this may be an oxymoron, but I don't think any intelligent Democrats actually believe the narrative about a cover-up as it relates to the clampdown on the records of the president's conversations with foreign leaders. Let's be honest. H.R. McMaster, the former national security advisor, is not some Trumpian sycophant. He said, quote, "The standard practice under former President Obama was to distribute records strictly to the relevant offices according to people who served in the White House under both presidents. But in the first few months of the Trump White House, the National Security Council, which you have to remember, don't forget our history, the National Security Council, when Trump first went into office, was in total disarray. Why? Well, Michael Flynn. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Now, when Michael Flynn was there, he utilized far more broad distribution lists, according to some White House officials. But then this happened. There were subsequent disclosures of details of the president's conversations with foreign leaders, and that began to fuel conspiracy theories among some within the West Wing that the deep state actors were involved in an effort to derail the Trump presidency. And I happen to believe that. There were leaks of his conversations with the Mexican president, with the Australian prime minister. The National Security Council then severely cut back on this broad dissemination of records, and the NSC instead started sending them only to those who were directly involved in the issues that were discussed in the call, according, again, to people knowledgeable of the situation. But go back to the National Security Council for a second. General Flynn was asked to resign in mid-February 2017. The reason, failure to disclose the true nature of his meeting with Russian officials to the President and Vice President Pence. He hasn't responded. Although officials say this, when H.R. McMaster took over as the second national security advisor, those distribution lists of the president's conversations with foreign leaders grew smaller and tighter. Although there were certain individuals, those of you who have clearances will understand this language, there were certain individuals who, on a need-to-know basis, could still access the records from the National Security Council traditional computer portal, which handled everything except CIA operational information. Those were the things that I got briefed on. And I never had access to those computers. If I wanted access to what was on those computers, I had to get briefed. Now, it couldn't be determined immediately whether the records of the president's conversations with Mexico's president were stored in the highly secure computer system, but access to that content was virtually blocked. As, in my opinion, it should have been. And quite frankly, if I had been in the president's position, I would have done exactly the same thing. Stop and think about this. You're the CEO of a major corporation, a Fortune 50 company. You want to talk to one of your counterparts somewhere, maybe a competitor, maybe one of your vendors, somebody in your supply chain. You want to have a confidential conversation, and I'm not talking about price fixing or anything like that. I'm just talking about maybe you want to share some proprietary information on an off-the-record conversation to understand how you might, be able to better serve a joint client a joint customer that you have. You don't want that getting out to anybody. You want to make sure you control the access to those conversations. Well, now you're the President of the United States of America, and the things that you say to foreign leaders are not any of the business of you, of me, or quite frankly, almost everybody in the deep state. Those records are on a need-to-know basis of the people that have the subject matter expertise or for the cabinet secretaries, the deputy secretaries, or the undersecretaries who are political appointees who owe their allegiance to the president and are least likely to go leaking information that can do one very dangerous thing, and that is this: hamper the one person who is in charge of America's foreign policy, the President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. This impeachment thing is driving me nuts. Now, Mark Twain once famously said something to the effect that, we're all safe as long as the legislature's not in session. Well, in this case, the Congress is on recess right now. But when they come back, there's not going to be any discussion of tax policy. There's not going to be any discussion of gun control or any sort of, background check. There's not going to be any discussion of any substantive issues whatsoever. I don't care. I don't really want gun legislation. I'd like to see tax legislation. But the reality on the ground is nothing is going to happen. Nancy Pelosi knows that. Mitch McConnell knows that. So the thing for you and I to watch is the speed. I talk about trend lines all the time. Well, the trend line that we're watching here is the speed limit. How fast do they move? Do they move so that they have either passed or failed to pass articles of impeachment prior to the Iowa caucuses or the first Democrat presidential primary? That's what we have to watch. I'm as sick of this story as anybody else. But it's important for you and me to understand the background of what's going on. The reason for that is, the one thing I haven't talked about, but I want to mention now is this, and that's the media. I was getting dressed. This was Monday morning. I was getting dressed. And I don't know why, I flipped on the TV in the bedroom, which I very rarely do. And normally I flip it on because I want to watch Fox 31's morning newscast. It gives me, this isn't a plug for Fox 31, but because the other stations, by the time I'm getting in the shower, I've walked the dog, done everything else. Well, now we're in the pre-recorded Today Show or Good Morning America, and I don't give a crap about those shows. So I flip over to Fox 31 because they can give me real quickly what the national headlines are, what the local headlines are, and what's the weather going to be for today. So I know how to dress. Do I need boots? Do I need a heavy shirt? Do I need a coat? Do I not need a jacket? What's the weather going to be? But when I flipped the television on Monday morning, it was on Fox News. It was Bill Hemmer and somebody filling in for his co-host. And I stopped for a moment and I watched. Bill Hemmer just sat there. But they were grilling. They had a panel of a couple of Republicans and a couple of Democrats. And as I listened to this co-host on the Fox News channel grill the Republican members, she was twisting the words that were in the transcript. She was twisting the words that were in the whistleblower's official complaint, trying to get the Republican members of the panel, the conservative members, to somehow capitulate and say, yeah, Donald Trump is in real trouble because the things that he has done amounts to high crimes and misdemeanors. We're going to get bombarded with propaganda, not just from MSNBC and CNN, but I guarantee you when I drive into the studio this afternoon, as I've told you before, I flip on Fox News to just listen to Shep Smith get my blood pressure up, and I know he's going to do it. Unless there's some horrific natural disaster, some, horrific tragic accident somewhere that, causes them to have that as their lead story. Oh, they'll cover whatever it is for 2 minutes or 90 seconds. And then it'll be right back to this. It'll be right back to impeachment. Mark my words. That's all we're going to hear. So I hope through this particular episode, I know I've talked about nothing but impeachment, but I hope I've given you some good background about what to watch, to pay attention to what the media does, And to listen to everything, even off Fox News, to listen to everything with the jaundiced ear because you're going to get bombarded with nothing but propaganda. The media has become the arm of the Democrat left. And to some degree, not all Fox anchors, not all Fox shows, but the one that I watched on Monday morning, it couldn't be any clearer to me that they were bending over backwards trying to say, oh, look at it. It's almost virtue signaling. Oh, look at us. We can act just like CNN and MSNBC. I stood there, I watched it, and I flipped right back over to Channel 31 to watch the weather. Maybe the weather's more important because I'm beginning to think that when this is all said and done, a big nothing burger. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Today. You know the drill. Subscribe on the iHeart app, on iTunes, or wherever you download podcasts. Just be sure and hit the subscribe button. Again, thanks for listening. I really do appreciate it. And be sure to listen to the radio program, 2 to 4, 630 K-House, 630 a.m. Or if you're listening to this podcast anywhere in the country, you can listen to the radio program on the same app, on the iHeart app. Talk to you tomorrow.